Welcome to your own channel, Whispers in Deadlight. New chilling, horror, creepy encounters, ghost stories videos are waiting for you. Please subscribe this channel, so you never miss a moment of the darkness. Now let's begin with story number 1. The house had been sold just months before we moved in. To anyone else, it was just another mansion, though it felt more like a relic from a forgotten era. The sort of house that had seen too many decades pass, too many lives come and go. To me, it was something else entirely. We had just moved into the place. A century-old house, far from the city and its humdrum life. The woods stretched endlessly around us, tall trees swaying like silent guardians. The house itself was built with old bricks that cracked and moaned when the wind howled. The floorboards creaked beneath the weight of history itself. It was only my parents and me living there, yet the house felt like it could hold 100 people. Huge, cavernous rooms with long hallways, a kitchen that could feed an army, and a living room so spacious that it was like a black hole for sound. I had always hated this house, but I didn't have much of a choice, so I dealt with it. The worst part. It was so isolated. There were no neighbors for miles, no streetlights to soften the darkness. On cold nights, the sound of the wind moving through the trees was the only thing I could hear. It was eerily quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. My parents, eager to visit family for a week, left me alone in that house. They had tried to convince me to come, but I had too much schoolwork to catch up on. It was just me, the vast emptiness, and the gnawing feeling that something wasn't quite right. The first couple of days went by smoothly, but by the third day, I had already started to feel the weight of the house's isolation pressing down on me. I had come home from school late that evening, tired and wanting nothing more than to lie in my bed and forget about the unsettling silence that seemed to grow stronger every hour. I opened the front door, tossed my school bag on the floor, and dragged myself up to the second floor. The house was dark, the kind of dark that made every shadow feel like it was alive. I had walked through the hallway countless times, but tonight something felt different. As I passed the doors to the spare bedrooms, I noticed that one of the doors was slightly ajar. I froze. The door had never been open before. It was as if someone had left it open, but no one had been there. I didn't immediately think there was something sinister at play, but that nagging feeling in my gut returned. I walked down the hallway, closer to the spare room. I stopped in front of the door and peered inside. The room was empty. There was only a bed and a few mismatched pieces of furniture. Dust settled in the corners like it had been left untouched for years. I closed the door, trying to shake off the unease creeping up my spine. I couldn't ignore the feeling though. The house was huge, and it was easy to overlook something like a door being left open. But there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. I walked past the door again as I headed to my room, my eyes flicking back to it. That old house always made me feel like I wasn't alone. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The house felt oppressive, the silence heavy. It was like the air itself was waiting for something. After about an hour, I stood up to make myself some dinner. The silence still clung to the house like an invisible weight. As I walked through the hallway, something caught my eye again. The spare bedroom door was open. This time, it was wider than before. I stood there, paralyzed for a moment. My mind raced, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Could I have missed it before? Maybe it had been open the whole time, and I just didn't notice. But no. I knew it wasn't like that. This wasn't a simple mistake. I had checked that door before. I slowly walked back to the spare room, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. I pushed the door open further, peering inside once more. Nothing had changed. The room was still empty, just a dusty old bed and furniture. But something was off. There was a coldness to the room that hadn't been there earlier. My breath hung in the air like I was standing in a freezer. I quickly shut the door again, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain it. There was no logical reason why the door had opened, and yet, it had. I went back to my room, locking the door behind me. I texted my parents, trying to play it cool but still desperate for some reassurance. I asked if they had noticed anything strange about the spare room door. They responded quickly, saying that they hadn't seen anything out of the ordinary. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that it was probably nothing. It was just an old house, with its creaks and groans. Still, my stomach churned with unease. I sat on my bed, trying to focus on something else, but the house wouldn't let me. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind outside, kept me on edge. Then, I heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then they grew louder. Thump. Thump. There was someone out there. Someone moving through the house. I grabbed the remote and quickly muted the TV. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears that I couldn't hear anything else. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I was frozen. Too scared to move, too scared to make a sound. My breath caught in my throat as I listened, waiting. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, there was a knock. A soft, slow knock on my bedroom door. Knock. 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 I held my breath. The knocking continued, soft and deliberate, as if whoever was on the other side was trying to lull me into a false sense of security. I couldn't believe what was happening. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but my body wouldn't obey. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. "I've already called the police." I had no intention of calling the police, at least, not yet. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't think straight. All I could focus on was the knocking, the unnerving silence between each tap, and the creeping dread that crawled up my spine. The knocking stopped. I waited, but the silence felt worse than anything. And then, I heard it. A sound that made my blood run cold. A long, drawn-out scratch. It wasn't a knock anymore. It was as if someone was dragging something sharp across the door, trying to carve their way through. The scratch was followed by the rattle of the door handle. It turned, back and forth, as if someone was testing it, seeing if it would open. I could barely move, but my mind raced. I had to do something. I had to make sure I was safe. I had to. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I gave the operator my address, describing the situation as calmly as I could. They asked what the person was doing now, and just as I started to speak, I heard the door handle turn again. My heart raced. The scratching sound continued, louder now. "Please, hurry," I pleaded with the operator. "I don't know who's out there, but they're trying to get in." I waited. 10 minutes felt like an eternity. The knocking stopped. The scratching stopped. The house fell back into its suffocating silence. When the police finally arrived, the house was still. No one was outside my door. The officers checked the perimeter, but there was no sign of anyone having broken in. The windows were all locked, and the doors were secure. But when they examined the door to my bedroom, they found something that made my blood run cold. A deep gash carved into the wood, as if something, or someone, had tried to tear through it. Nothing more happened that night. The police left, unable to find any clues. My parents came home the next day, and we moved out shortly after. But the memories of that house lingered. I still remember the knock, the scratching, the cold emptiness of the house, pressing in on me from all sides. Whatever had been lurking there, whatever had stalked me that night, had never been explained. But I knew one thing for sure. I was never going back. The house was sold a few months later, and the new owners? They never lasted long. It was a regular Friday night, just like any other for Adam. He lived alone in a modest apartment tucked in a quiet corner of a suburban neighborhood. The kind of place that seemed to fade into the background of the city, just far enough from the chaos but close enough to make him feel like a part of the world. The apartment wasn't much, just a small, one-bedroom unit with peeling wallpaper and a kitchen that was too cramped to really do much cooking. But Adam didn't mind. He wasn't one to complain. It was his little sanctuary, his place to escape after the long days spent working as a freelance graphic designer. Tonight, however, was different. Tonight, Adam had made the decision to do nothing. Nothing but relax, unwind, and let the hours drift by. He had no deadlines looming, no work to finish. Just a few beers, some movies, and the soft hum of his aging TV in the background. The sun had long since set, and a chill had settled over the neighborhood. Adam had just finished a hot shower and changed into comfortable clothes, his old, worn jeans and a faded hoodie. He opened a can of beer and cracked his neck as he slumped down on the couch, flicking through streaming services until he found something worth watching. Tonight, it would be a movie marathon. No fancy intellectual dramas or complicated plots. Just mindless horror movies to dull the edges of his weary mind. He didn't expect anything unusual. In fact, Adam was convinced that nights like these, where the world outside seemed to disappear and time slowed down, were the only real peace he would ever get. The evening passed without incident. The flickering lights of the TV screen cast a dim glow across the small living room, illuminating the familiar, worn-out furniture. The soft crunch of popcorn and the occasional swig of beer were his only company. The world felt far away. So far, in fact, that Adam barely noticed how long he'd been sitting there until the clock on the wall caught his attention. It was almost midnight. Adam had just reached for another beer when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, momentarily confused by the notification. It was from his favorite local burger joint. He hadn't ordered anything, but the message made him curious. Order received. Your burger will arrive shortly. Adam frowned. Had he really ordered food? He didn't remember placing an order, but then again, he had been drinking. Maybe it was something he did in a drunken stupor. His mind often played tricks on him when he had a few too many beers. He decided to ignore it. It wasn't like he was starving anyway. But then the thought of having a hot, juicy burger did make his stomach rumble. He could feel the temptation tugging at him, pulling him back into the thought of ordering more food, even though he hadn't. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the idea, but when the phone buzzed again, he couldn't ignore it. We're on our way. Your delivery is en route. There it was again, the message that didn't make sense. Adam didn't recall any kind of delivery confirmation. In fact, the app didn't even show the usual details about the order, just vague, generic updates. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the lingering unease that began creeping into the back of his mind. I must be losing it, he muttered to himself, reaching for the remote to change the channel. But then, the doorbell rang. Adam froze. He wasn't expecting anyone. The doorbell rang again, louder this time, its shrill sound slicing through the stillness of the apartment. Adam felt his heartbeat pick up speed. He stood up slowly, uncertain, his body stiff from both the alcohol and the sudden surge of anxiety that rushed through him. He wasn't expecting anyone, and yet there was someone at his door. Who is it? He called out, his voice slightly slurred from the beers. There was no answer, just the sound of shuffling footsteps on the other side. Adam's breath hitched as the thought of opening the door seemed more and more ridiculous, yet the doorbell rang again, this time with more urgency. Okay, I'm coming, he muttered, making his way toward the door, trying to shake off the unease that was now settling deep in his stomach. When Adam opened the door, he wasn't sure what he expected, but the man standing on the other side certainly wasn't it. He was tall, wearing dark jeans and a faded hoodie, the hood pulled over his head. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, and his eyes were hidden in the shadows of the hoodie. There was something unnerving about his posture, like he didn't quite belong here, but was too comfortable to care. Hey man, Adam began, still half dazed from the beer. You deliverin' some food? I don't remember ordering anything. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he just stood there, staring at Adam with a strange, unsettling calmness. Your burger's on the way, the man finally said, his voice low and smooth. Adam blinked, confused. But I didn't. He stopped himself mid-sentence, trying to think of how to ask what was going on, but the words wouldn't come. Not to worry, the man said with a small smile. It's coming. Just wanted to let you know. And just like that, He turned around and began walking away. Adam watched him go, his confusion deepening. But before he could even think to close the door, the man turned back briefly, his eyes briefly flashing from beneath the hood. "Enjoy your meal," he said, his voice oddly hollow. And then, without another word, he vanished into the night. Adam stared at the empty doorstep for several moments, his hand still gripping the doorknob. The silence that followed the man's departure felt thick, almost oppressive. His breath quickened, and for the first time all night, he felt a prickle of fear creep up his spine. What had just happened? He didn't remember ordering anything, yet the strange delivery man had known exactly what he was talking about. But that wasn't even the weirdest part. It was the fact that the man had seemed so detached, so cold, and the way he spoke, so matter-of-factly, as if this was all just part of a script. Adam closed the door slowly, locking it behind him. He took a step back, still trying to make sense of what had just occurred. The apartment was too quiet now. The familiar hum of the TV, the flickering light from the lamp beside him, all of it seemed to suddenly fade into the background. It felt wrong. He turned back to the couch, his mind racing as the absurdity of the situation slowly seeped into his consciousness. But there was something else, too. A strange feeling gnawing at him, a deep, unsettling sense that something wasn't right. He sat back down and grabbed his phone. The screen flashed once before it lit up. Adam saw a new notification. Order cancelled. Delivery not possible. His heart skipped a beat. The app had just cancelled the order. Adam stared at the message for a long time, his mind struggling to comprehend it. If the order had been cancelled, then who the hell was that man? Adam's hands were shaking as he placed the phone back on the table. He hadn't had that many beers, and yet his mind was spinning, trying to catch up with the bizarre encounter. He stood up, his legs feeling weak beneath him, and walked toward the door again, as though the answer to the riddle of the mysterious man could be found just beyond the threshold. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe he was just tired, or drunk. But when he reached for the door handle, it clicked. The door had unlocked itself. Adam froze. He could have sworn he had locked it. His mind raced. Had he forgotten? Cautiously, he peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just the dark, empty hallway outside. Confused, he reached down and turned the handle, pulling the door open. The hallway was completely empty. A cold gust of wind blew in, carrying with it the faintest scent of something metallic, like iron. Adam's heart raced as he stood frozen in the doorway. It was as though the air had thickened, the weight of the night growing heavier with every passing second. Something was off. But what? Adam stood in the doorway, the cold air from the hallway swirling around his feet like a ghostly presence. His breath came in shallow gasps, his heartbeat quickening as the eerie silence pressed down on him. He took a tentative step forward, eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway, but there was nothing. Just emptiness. He closed the door behind him with a soft click, the sound reverberating through the apartment as if mocking him. But it wasn't the sound of the door closing that unsettled him. No, it was the strange, rhythmic clicking that followed it. It came from somewhere deeper in the apartment, like the sound of a metal latch being slowly, methodically clicked into place. Adam's eyes widened in sudden realization. The same click that had woken him earlier from his drunken stupor. The sound that had drawn him back into consciousness, leaving him confused and disoriented. Now it was back, louder and clearer, coming from within the walls of his own home. His mind raced. He hadn't heard anything like it before. No creaking pipes, no groaning floorboards. Just this rhythmic, mechanical click. Like something, or someone, was inside. Adam's hands trembled as he fumbled for his phone. His fingers brushed against the cold screen as he unlocked it, praying he would find some kind of explanation, some message that would make this all make sense. But when he opened the screen, the same notification popped up again. Order cancelled. Delivery not possible. It was as if the app itself was mocking him, refusing to let go of the strangeness. The unnerving connection between the mysterious delivery man and the odd click seemed to grow with every passing second. Adam's pulse quickened. The clicking continued, coming from the living room. It was growing louder, more urgent. His legs felt like lead, unwilling to move, but his mind was screaming at him to act, to do something. But what? Where was the source of the noise? What the hell was going on? With a final burst of courage, Adam turned and walked toward the living room. His footsteps were hesitant at first, slow, but the noise grew more persistent, pushing him forward, as if something was urging him on. The familiar warmth of the apartment now felt oppressive, the air thick with a sense of dread that he couldn't shake. He reached the doorway of the living room and froze. The room was exactly how he had left it, save for one thing. The lights were dimmed to an almost imperceptible glow, and the flickering TV screen now displayed static. But the static wasn't just random. It was almost too regular, like the hum of something unnatural trying to break through. Adam stepped into the room, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. As he moved closer to the TV, he could see something moving within the static. It was too faint at first, but then, clear as day, he saw it. A face. Eyes staring back at him through the screen. Wide, dark eyes. Hollow. Vacant. And yet, they were unmistakably real. He stumbled back in shock, his breath caught in his throat. He slammed his hand against the TV, trying to turn it off, but the static only grew louder, more intense. The face in the screen didn't move, it just stared. It felt like it was watching him, not just through the TV, but from the very air itself. For a moment, Adam thought he might faint. The room seemed to tilt, as if gravity itself was shifting, and the walls began to close in. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to his knees. The clicking noise had stopped. In its place, the sound of breathing filled the room. Heavy, ragged breathing. It wasn't his. Adam's eyes darted around the room, heart pounding in his chest. He knew he wasn't alone. The air was thick with something unspoken, something that made the very space feel like it was alive. Then, in a flash of terror, Adam's gaze snapped back to the TV screen. The face was gone. But it hadn't just disappeared, it was now standing in front of him. Adam bolted upright, eyes wide, searching the room with frantic urgency. The figure that had been in the TV was now standing just beyond the darkened doorway. Its features were indistinct, blurry, but Adam could make out the shape. Tall, thin, cloaked in shadows. His heart hammered against his ribs as he staggered back, tripping over his own feet. The figure stepped closer, each movement slow and deliberate, as if savoring the fear that radiated from Adam. "What do you want?" Adam gasped, his voice barely above a whisper, though every part of him screamed to run. The figure didn't speak, but the air around Adam seemed to grow colder, heavier, as though it was suffocating him. The walls pressed in, the darkness pulling at him, wrapping around him like an invisible hand. He could taste the fear now, bitter and sharp. The figure's features began to come into focus, not with the clarity he hoped for, but with a grotesque distortion. Its face was a warped mask of flesh, half human, half something else. Its eyes were wide and vacant, black holes that swallowed everything in sight. The clicking started again, louder now, filling the room with an almost unbearable noise. Adam could feel it in his bones, each click vibrating through his chest, sinking deep into his skin. Suddenly, he understood. The clicking, the delivery, the strange man at the door, it was all connected. This thing, this presence, had been toying with him, toying with his mind, manipulating his every move. It had made itself known through subtle, horrifying encounters. First the delivery, then the face in the static, and now this creature in the flesh. It wasn't just haunting his apartment. It was haunting him. Panic overtook Adam as the figure took another step forward, its breath now audible, low, and guttural. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing for an escape. The back door. He had a back door that led out into the alley. He bolted for it, but as soon as he reached the hallway, the apartment seemed to shift, the walls closing in tighter, the hallway stretching impossibly far. His heart pounded in his ears. The sound of the clicking grew faster, more frantic. The air was thick, suffocating. The creature was right behind him. Adam lunged for the back door, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. But just as his fingers brushed the metal, the door slammed shut on its own, locking with a deafening click. The breath in his lungs caught in his throat, and he turned around, desperate, panicked. The figure was there, inches from him now. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly in the dark, its twisted smile widening impossibly, as if it were reveling in his fear. "Please," Adam whispered, his voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" But the figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised one long, thin hand. The air around it crackled with energy, an unnatural static hum filling the room. The creature stepped forward, its hand outstretched. And then, as if by some unseen force, Adam was frozen in place, unable to move, unable to scream. For a moment, the room fell silent. And then, a voice. A low, raspy whisper, like wind through dead leaves, drifted into Adam's ear. "The door is open. It always has been." Suddenly, Adam saw it. The door. The one the figure had walked through earlier, the one he hadn't noticed. It wasn't a door at all. It was a portal. A gateway. And the creature wasn't just some supernatural entity. It was the keeper of the door. As the creature's fingers brushed against his forehead, Adam's body jerked, and a cold wave of nausea hit him like a tidal wave. His vision blurred as the world around him began to unravel. The room, the apartment, everything seemed to disintegrate, piece by piece. It was as if reality itself was bending, twisting, falling apart. The clicking sound, the one that had haunted him all night, grew louder, more frantic, until it became deafening. Then, the world went black. Adam awoke on the floor, his body aching, his head pounding. He could still taste the metallic scent of the air, still feel the cold chill lingering on his skin. But the apartment was empty now. No creature. No clicking. Just silence. He pushed himself to his feet, disoriented, terrified. His mind was racing, but nothing made sense. He stumbled to the front door and opened it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. Outside, the world was quiet. The street was empty. No signs of life. It was as if nothing had ever happened. Adam stepped outside, unsure if what he had experienced was real or just a horrible nightmare. But as he walked down the street, something caught his eye. At the far end of the block, standing in the shadows, was the man. The delivery man. His eyes glowing faintly, his smile wide. And Adam knew, deep in his bones, that it had never really ended. The door was still open. It was late 2021 when David decided to leave everything behind. The small town he was moving to offered little promise, but a job was a job. His previous life, filled with bitterness and regret, seemed a distant memory in the rearview mirror. All he could afford was a small, run-down one-bedroom unit in an old building atop a forgotten hill. The complex was ancient, and though it was located in a quiet area, it was eerily empty. The only sound that filled the air was the creaking of the building itself, like it was alive, groaning under the weight of years of neglect. But David didn't mind. It was temporary, just a place to crash after long shifts at work. He could handle the silence, the emptiness. It was better than the chaos he'd left behind. David settled into his new life with relative ease. His days were spent in a haze of monotonous work, and his nights, when he wasn't too exhausted, were marked by the silence of his apartment. The first few weeks passed without incident, until one evening, when a knock at his door startled him awake. When David opened it, he found an older man standing there, maybe in his 50s, dressed in a worn jacket. The man had dark eyes, unnaturally wide, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. "I'm your new neighbor," he said, his voice too loud, too eager. "I just moved in next door." David wasn't sure what to make of him. The man's gaze felt too intense, as if he was trying to read him, figure him out. But David, polite and tired, just nodded. The man never told him his name, and as he left with a stiff, awkward wave, David couldn't shake the strange feeling that had taken root in his chest. Days passed, and David's routine remained unchanged. But one evening, as he trudged up the stairs to his apartment, he noticed something odd. Through the blinds of the neighboring unit, he saw a faint movement. The blinds swayed, just enough to suggest someone was watching him from the other side. He froze, staring at the window for a long moment. Was it the man? It didn't make sense. He hadn't seen him since their brief exchange. David hurried into his apartment, his mind racing. He tried to shake it off, but the feeling of being watched gnawed at him as he went about his evening. The next day, as David was returning home, there was a knock on the door again. It was the same man. His eyes were even wider than before. "Could you help me with the thermostat?" the man asked, his voice almost pleading. "I can't seem to get it right. Must be my age, eh?" David hesitated. It wasn't his problem, but he didn't want to seem rude. With a sigh, he agreed. The man led him to his unit. When they entered, David immediately noticed something was wrong. The room was bare, completely empty. There were no boxes, no furniture, not even a moving truck in sight. The walls were cracked and peeling, the floor was dusty, and the air was thick with the stench of mildew and decay. It looked abandoned. You sure you moved in here?" David asked, his voice strained. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he smiled a strange, unsettling smile. "It's just in progress," he said. "You know how it is." But David couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The smell, the emptiness, it felt wrong. He tried to back away, but the man stepped closer, blocking the door. David felt a wave of panic. "Please, just help me," the man urged, his voice turning sharp. David backed up, desperate to get out. His heart raced as he bolted for the door. He slammed it shut behind him, but he could still hear the man's footsteps following him. David locked the door quickly, but the eerie feeling didn't fade. Later that night, as David lay in bed, the silence was broken by faint scratching sounds. It was coming from the walls. His breath caught in his throat as he sat up, straining to listen. The sounds grew louder, as if something was trying to break through the plaster. A knock at the door. David froze. It was too familiar now. The man. He was outside, and David could feel the presence of something dark, something lurking just beyond the door. He checked the peephole, but he saw nothing. Just the dark hallway beyond. He waited, but the knocking didn't stop. The door handle rattled. David's pulse quickened. The whispers started again. Faint, like a cold breath on the back of his neck. David couldn't sleep. The whispers were getting louder, more insistent, like someone was speaking directly into his ear. He lay still, trying to ignore the unsettling sensation that something was in the room with him. He turned on the light and checked the apartment, but there was no one there. Still, he could feel the oppressive weight of an unseen presence, and the whispers, like a chorus, only grew louder. When David arrived home from work the next evening, he saw it. The door handle was shaking. It wasn't a breeze. It wasn't the wind. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. David's stomach dropped. He slowly approached the door, his mind racing with fear and confusion. He opened the door cautiously. But there was nothing. The apartment was just as he had left it. Yet, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Every hair on the back of his neck stood up. He could almost feel the presence behind him, a cold breath on his skin. David was at his breaking point. The whispers, the scratching, the man's strange behavior, it all felt like too much. One evening, after hearing another round of whispers from the walls, David decided to confront the man. He couldn't keep living like this, trapped in fear. He knocked on the man's door. The man answered, but this time, his smile was gone. His face was a mask of malice. "Come in," he said, his voice low, guttural. David stepped inside. The place was different now. It wasn't empty anymore. Strange symbols covered the walls, and the air was thick with an unholy presence. The man stood in front of him, eyes gleaming. "I've been watching you," the man said. "I knew you would come. Now, you're mine." David's heart raced as he realized the truth. This wasn't a neighbor. The man was something far darker, and now he was trapped. With a surge of adrenaline, David broke free. He bolted from the man's grasp, pushing past him and sprinting down the hallway. But the building was no longer just a building. The walls seemed to shift and close in around him, as if the building itself was alive. He could hear the man's footsteps behind him, growing closer. David reached his apartment, slammed the door shut, and locked it, gasping for breath. The whispers continued, louder now, echoing in his mind. The next few days were a blur. David moved out as quickly as he could, but even after he left the building, the nightmares followed. He found a new place, tried to start over. But one night, as he settled in, there was a knock at the door. His heart pounded in his chest as he opened it. No one was there. He stepped outside, but the air was heavy, thick with the same oppressive energy he had felt in the old building. And then, in a whisper just behind him, he heard it, "I'm always watching." David ran. He never stopped running. For David, it was a lesson learned the hard way. Had he walked into that unit with the man, things would have been much worse. The man had been more than just a creepy neighbor. He was something else, something malevolent, something that had been watching him from the very start. David was lucky to escape. But no matter where he went, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched.